You are listening to Come As You Are, the podcast. My name is Tyler, and I am joined by my two friends, Amanda and Stephanie. We are a trio of coaches coming together to explore life's biggest topics. Each episode, we hold true to our name, Come As You Are, by showing up and going live. Whatever we bring to the table that week is what we talk about. No scripts, no planning, just real and raw conversations. And audience participation is always encouraged. Our mission is to create a space where vulnerability and authenticity take center stage, and we believe in the power of deep conversations and soulful connections. So welcome to the show. We're happy that you're here, and we invite you now to just sit back, relax, and enjoy today's conversation.
Hello.
Good morning. Well, it's really morning for Tyler here in Texas.
Good morning to you.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world.
Literally. How are we doing this Friday morning? Or this Friday, I should say.
You know, I'm clearly recovering from something this week, but I'm excited to be here. This is a great way for me to start my Friday.
I know, I'm excited. I'm excited for this change of timing. Like I did, like, not gonna lie, I literally rolled out of bed like 25 minutes ago, and I was like, oh, we got to do this today. So let me try to make myself look presentable and show up. And so my brain is totally not on. I don't think a lot in the morning. So I'm here for the ride this morning, and this is gonna be fun.
I love this. Isn't that like I mean, how easy was it for you to get up? Not because it's an appointment, but like you get to come here. Like,
yeah, it was like a nice, like it was a nice way to wake up knowing that I was coming here to do this. Like, it was like, oh, I get to see my two best friends and we get to like hang out and have a good time. So it is really already a spectacular way to like wake up on Friday morning. So I'm loving it.
yes.
And
And I'm
also-
so
Go ahead, Stephanie, go.
I just wanted to say, like, I'm so happy that this is now my kind of like lunch. Like, this is how I'm starting my afternoon, like kind of after lunch, just walk the dog. And now I get to come and have this like wonderful deep dive with the two of you on whatever. And then kind of like after that, do some other stuff and then close out my week. So that I like this new timing as well so much.
Yeah, and I was just gonna add, you know, how this is like a real life, like beautiful example of this like embodiment of come as you are, you know, like just showing up. That's what we do here.
Yeah.
And we had some really like cool show ups already, right? Like I remember Tyler at an airport before, or actually at a Starbucks.
I was at a Starbucks on my way to the airport. Yes. Yeah. That was off. I mean, I showed up and then I listened to that audio again and I was like, wow, that was terrible. But again, like that's beyond the point, because it's literally all about showing up. And that has been something that I've been deeply reflecting on here for a while, is like just showing up and the power of just showing up, even when we don't even have it all figured out or we have it all perfect or whatnot. Like, there's more power, there's more momentum in the fact that we just chose to show up, you know? Like, I was talking to one of my coworkers yesterday. We were having we were talking about imposter syndrome, and because it's such a hot topic and it's something that we talk a lot about here, I think, on this show, and just all the time. Like, everybody has imposter syndrome. And like, I posed that question: if everybody has imposter syndrome, then does it really exist? Like, if everybody suffers from imposter syndrome, does it really exist? And And then I like also took it a step farther and was like, I believe like, because I call no BS now on imposter syndrome. Like that I've started to change my mentality of like, I can't blame my fears anymore on imposter syndrome, because every single person gets imposter syndrome. So it's not like I'm special. It's not like I'm the only one who has it. So I was like, I've started to do a lot of like reprogramming on the imposter syndrome to like remove that from my excuses, because every single person in this world gets imposter syndrome. And like, if every single person gets it or experiences it, does it really exist? Like, and also like coming back to like just the whole idea of like showing up, like that's how you overcome the imposter syndrome, is by just showing up. It's like we have to continuously be strong and and have the courage to just show up. And with that, yes, the imposter syndrome is going to be there. But if we recognize that, hey, I'm not the only one struggling with this, then we can overcome it. And I think what happens is we think we're the only people who are struggling with this. And y'all, we're not that special. Everyone in the world struggles with imposter syndrome. And so we can't let that be the excuse that stops us from showing up.
Yeah, definitely not a good excuse. I love that you've labeled it as an excuse, because I think not necessarily that this is something. I think by having this awareness, I don't know necessarily for myself if this like could be used as an excuse, um, because like you said, like I am so aware that this is something that we all struggle with. Um, and I think it's really interesting. I think for me, it's also more of like the the perfect journey, like the perfectionism, of it all, that it has to be perfect or not at all. That's definitely been my journey, and I have definitely made a lot of progress, and that's something to be, I think, super proud of. But I wonder, with these like imposter syndrome, perfectionism, sometimes gets like a bad rap, that maybe these are actually positives. Like to me, entirely letting go of the perfectionism was like, that's not ever going to happen, because it's like, you know, the perfectionism in some ways is like, I hold myself to a certain standard, like, and not, and then this is like the overachiever, but like, it's like, I want things to be a certain way. And, uh, and then comes in the controller, right? Where you got to control everything. But I think that for me, anyways, the perfectionism at one point in my life was the excuse, right? Like it was it's not perfect, so you can't go any farther, right? And I think this is kind of like what you were talking about, Tyler, with the imposter syndrome. It's like, I'm feeling the imposter syndrome, hard stop, right? And I think for me, having this like perfectionism is a way of holding myself to a certain standard, but also knowing that you just need to take that one step, because it's never going to be like taking the imperfect action to perfect, right? Like you can't, it's not like, it was like perfection paralysis is what I used to call it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it would have to be so perfect, like, every, I dotted, T crossed, and if I missed one, then like, it was just a disaster. And letting go of that, I feel like is okay, but fully letting go of it, I feel like for me is something that I don't think I would ever do, because I think that keeps me like, I don't think I'm like explaining this correctly, but like, yeah, Tyler, please jump in. Are you following? Like, am I making sense?
Yes, you are. And I want to throw in one more, because you talked about imposter syndrome. You talked about Yeah, perfectionism, you were saying the overachiever, you were talking about like all of these things that kind of like in a sense slow us down. There's another one that I just want to throw in the mix, and then I want to hear from Stephanie actually, because I think she has thoughts running through her head. I see the smile. And the other one that I want to throw into this mix is the all or nothing mentality.
Ooh, yes.
Because like for me, I have struggled, and I was talking to a client this week about this, like from perfectionism and the all or nothing mentality, which is like a double-edged sword, because it's like, oh, if it's not perfect and if I'm not doing it 100%, like totally like all or nothing 100% in, I might as well not be doing it at all. Those two things were my kryptonite. But I still love what you were saying there, Amanda, around how could we flip the script and say, okay, instead of looking at these things as like bad traits to have, and lean into like, how can we leverage this? So like with perfectionism, I love that you were saying like perfectionism gives me a standard, just like all or nothing gives me a standard. Because if my heart isn't fully into something, I don't want it. Like, why do I want to do that? Why do I want to be a part of that? And so like I do believe that we can use these traits as we can take the good from the traits and then like leave the bad. So I just wanted to throw in the all or nothing as well, because I think that's a juicy one that we all struggle with as well.
Well, I want to first of all acknowledge, Tyler, you mentioned in the beginning, you just woke up and you're like, your brain's not functioning. And I just want to mention, like, you're such a perfect example of, when you roll out of bed and then you get to do what you love, like you are on, right? There's like, you just bring it. So I'm going to call out the excuse here and say, no, you're like so on right now. I'm like, it could be any time of day, right? We would have these juicy conversations. And I just really love to see that right now, like how it's unfolding. I'm like, wait a minute, Tyler just said he rolled out of bed and now he's dropping some epic questions here. Like, what's happening? I love this so much.
The power of passion.
Say again?
The power of passion.
Power of passion. Yes, absolutely. I love this. And then I actually want to throw in one more in the mix, and that is social anxiety. Because I literally also just heard that yesterday or the day before, that every human has social anxiety except for psychopath. They just don't have any empathy, so they don't have social anxiety. But every person has social anxiety to a certain extent as well. Same with the other things you've mentioned, like with perfectionism. I think everyone has that to a certain extent. And an imposter for sure also. And what I've been thinking with all these little, I don't know, how do we call them? Like these little hurdles that we put in our own path there. I think it all comes back to like us and our role in society and how we are portrayed by other people, and that we have this make-believe image of ourselves and we want to keep that up. And we all know we have these human needs. We want to belong, we want to be safe, we want to be loved. And I think when we have these sort of symptoms like perfectionism or whatnot, then it seems like a clever way to make sure that we get our needs fulfilled. But actually, at the end of the day, it's a bit of an armor that we put on to make sure that we are portrayed in this image that we think we should be showing to society. And let me know if this is making any sense at all. But the journey then, like you were saying, Amanda, of dropping this, of like coming to a place where you no longer call yourself a perfectionist paralysis person, is to say, you know what, I am who I am and I'm showing up and I have the courage to do that. And I'm not attached to the outcome anymore. I think that's something I want to throw into the conversation here, is the attachment that we have to, okay, if I go out there now and I portray myself like XYZ, what do I expect back? And when I don't have any expectations, then I'm free. Because then it doesn't matter, right? And then it also doesn't matter what I do, whether I express myself as an apple or a pear or a lemon, it doesn't matter, because I'm not depending on other people's approval, maybe. So I think that's what's coming up for me. And there was like so much more, but my head's like all marbles now, honestly. So I'm like, as I'm talking, I'm also having all of these ideas. I'm like, oh gosh. But I'm going to stop here and give you two a chance to chime in anymore.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow.
I feel that. I feel that. I think that does play into it a bit. Yeah, go ahead, Tyler. Tell us. What are your thoughts?
No, I mean, it's very interesting to kind of think about why we use perfectionism, imposter syndrome, the all or nothing mentality, all of these little traits that we all carry with us as ways to help us feel love, safe, and belonging, and also that expectation of society. And like, we're doing this because we want to appease certain expectations, and appease certain people, or whatever. Like, how much of our life is spent trying to like, trying to like perform for other people, and how much of our life is spent trying to make other people happy when we're not even focused on our own happiness. And like, Stephanie, you mentioned the word freedom, which is a big topic that I've been thinking about recently, because I am going to Toronto next Saturday, and coming your way, Amanda, and I am getting on stage and I am talking about freedom live in front of a full audience of people. And so I've been really thinking about that subject of freedom, and what Stephanie said was so powerful, of like when you let go of trying to appease other people, and when you let go of doing it out of obligation, and you do it just because you love it, that's like when you find that freedom. My whole speech that I'm going to be giving is all around how we find freedom by coming into ourselves and really getting to know the true you, and like allowing ourselves to escape the shackles of societal expectations, and kind of liberate ourselves from what society deems as right versus wrong. And to me, like, true freedom comes when we have the courage to show up into this world as our most authentic selves. And like, our most authentic selves, we're imperfect people. And this is why, for me personally, I have started to really start to talk about perfectionism and imposter syndrome, and like the all or nothing mentality that we've been chatting about this morning. I've been coming out. Wow. Okay. Whew. I'm having a massive like full circle here happening. But like, I've been coming out and talking about, perfectionism and the imposter syndrome and the all or nothing mentality, and saying, hey, I struggle with this too. Like, you're not alone. Because so many of us feel like we're alone, feel like we're the only ones that, sit there and hyper analyze and hyper fixate on every movement that we make in this world. That is a daily practice for me. Every single action I take, I go, was that the right action? Did I do that right? Like, could I have done that differently? I don't know. But it's that perfectionism paralysis that Amanda was talking about. Like, that's what's keeping us stuck. And recognizing that we can let go and just embrace our imperfections and celebrate them. Celebrate the fact that we are human. We're not robots. We're not meant to be perfect. We're not meant to be spot on. We're not meant to be like this cookie cutter like image. No. We are meant to be ourselves, our whole selves, all the flaws, all the quirks, all of the, weird things that make us us. Like, embrace those things, love those things. Like, to me, working through perfectionism and working through imposter syndrome and kind of getting rid of this like all or nothing mentality, to me, it's been the largest act of self-love that I could give myself, because I'm no longer tying myself down to this image of perfectionism, this image of I'm not capable. For the first time in my life, I'm looking in the mirror going, Tyler, you are capable. You can do this, and it's a massive shift in my beliefs, in my identity, and how I'm showing up in this world. And it's coming because I am making a choice to let go of other people's expectations of me. And I'm asking myself, what do I expect from me? What do I want? It's going in, it's coming in to yourself. And again, really getting to know that deeper version of you. And it's powerful, wonderful work, and I love it.
So as both of you were sharing, there was two other things that were coming to my mind that, as we talked about the perfectionism and the all or nothing, the controller, all of those things. And almost like, like the imposter syndrome, like these little labels we give to things to describe maybe a way of being, if that makes sense. And, like I said, as you both were sharing, I thought of, the overthinker and the people pleaser.
Mm-hmm.
They're both so common. And so I love that we're like really bringing these things to this conversation, because like you said, Tyler, so many people feel alone in these things. And when we can have the conversation and almost like normalizing these things, then they lose that grip that they have on us, or that paralyzing effect, right? Because it's like, okay, well, if this is something that we're all sort of struggling with, then we can turn to ourselves. And I think this is a perfect way of like, asking ourselves the question, like, how do I want to show up? How do I want to be in the world? And I wonder if that can shift us out of this putting so much concern, as Stephanie, I think you were beautifully highlighting before, that so much of it is like and this is where I think I started really thinking about people pleaser, because it's like we're just looking for the approval of others and how do we show up. But if we shift that into, well, yeah, how do I want to show up? How am I being in the world? It's very different than like, how are people going to perceive me? What are people going to think about me?
Yeah, and I want to add, I think this takes recognizing in the first place and actually having conversations with others, and by them sharing, and then you realizing, or you are sharing, and then they're sharing too. And then you both realize, oh, I'm not the only one. Like that starts. And I can actually share this week, I've had this experience in a therapy session I went to. So I have both sessions by myself. And then we also have group sessions with a smaller group. And we always get to share about our week and struggles that we're having. And very often our therapist asks, hey, who else has this experience or had this experience in the past? And so often the majority of participants raise their hands. And it's so beautiful. Like nothing has been discussed or fixed, or no one was, treated in that sense. But just by sitting in a room together and hearing someone else, oh, you're also overthinker. And, I love that you brought this up, Amanda, because this was literally the topic that we had this week, overthinking, or ruminating actually, and loop thinking. So that's when, for anyone who may not be familiar with this, so this is when, for example, I do this a lot, where I sit there and I think about a situation or how I want to approach a situation that I will have in the future. And then literally for like an hour and a half, I obsess over how I could show up to that conversation and what I could say and the words I could use. And so many of the things that we're talking about here today come together in this ruminating, in this loop thinking, which is, not wanting to wanting to fit in, and perfection, like being perfectionistic, right? Wanting to find the right words, and of course, fearing rejection. And something else I wanted to mention here, because there was this feeling that came up for me as you were sharing about, as you were just sharing, Amanda, this feeling of that we experience shame when we find ourselves being paralyzed, not doing the things we actually want to do, or feeling like, oh, we are the only ones. I think the feeling that we have in those moments is shame. And this is like one of our core emotions, right? And so I think the antidote to shame 100% of the time is then when we call it out. And by having those conversations with other people is when we actually, we can shine the light on the shame, we can shine the light on the thing, and then it kind of evaporizes for the most part, I think. So that's something I also wanted to bring here, is this like, okay, what are we actually experiencing emotionally when we go through these things? And maybe also where the paralysis is coming from. I can imagine that just like also very much knowing this like idea of, oh no, it needs to be perfect, or like I don't even do it at all. And then like having these super high expectations, and then getting discouraged by this because I know I can't live up to my own idea of who I'm supposed to be, right? It's not helpful for sure. It's definitely not helpful. And then I'm just putting myself in that situation where I've done this and thinking about the emotional experience of, oh yeah, if I do it anyway, and I do it what we now call imperfectly, then I'm not fulfilling my own expectations. And then I think also other people will portray me as imperfect, which is not great as a perfectionist, right? You never want to be imperfect. And then I think the shame comes in. I don't know if this is making sense for the two of you, but I was just trying to figure out, okay, what's the emotional cycle there? Where does the shame come up? And I think this is one area where, or how this actually comes together. But it's, I also guess, really complex. And especially when these different things, these different armors like come together, it gets it gets it gets messy, and we're like, oh my gosh, I have this and I have that, and
I think, you know, for the three of us, and how I know that we really take conversations and just go really deep, I feel like this conversation, to add that another layer of depth, it wouldn't be fair to have this conversation without really getting to, like, because oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm gonna say this, but I feel like so much of what we've talked about is like just surface level stuff.
So
just wait,
very casual, yeah.
very casual. But because let me make sense of that, because I think we haven't really touched on, like, because we're talking about the, almost like, okay, I'm getting this image of, like, we've talked about the tree, like we've talked about what we can see above the ground, like we've talked about, we can see the perfectionism, we can see the overthinking, the all or nothing, the imposter syndrome, blah 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 blah, right? But we haven't talked about, like, what's under the surface, like what are the roots, like where's that idea even come from? And I feel like we kind of started to get there when we talked about the love, safety, belonging, that piece, but truly a lot of these things stem from childhood experiences. And so I think that it's really, to add that next layer, I would love to take our conversation in that direction. And I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are.
Well, I mean, I'm glad you opened that up, because as I was listening to Stephanie there, I was thinking why, where did mine come from, and I believe, like, my perfectionism and my all or nothing mentality, and a lot of what I've struggled with has really stemmed from people pleasing. Like, growing up, I just wanted to please everyone because I had such a desire to belong. So again, coming back to love, safety, and belonging, like, I really wanted to belong. And, I have been, I don't even know, like I want to go. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go there because why not? It's morning and my brain's not on yet, so let's just go here. For like most of my life, and most of my life meaning probably like the first 25 years, and then when I got into coaching and started to do all of the unpacking, things started to shift. But most of my life was spent trying to fit in to boxes that society, like, has placed on us, trying to be this, like, perfect image of society. And for me, the two biggest things that I've struggled with in my life is, number one, my sexuality, and then later on, like, gender identity, because it's a lot more complicated than what I realized when I first came out. And then number two, my body image. Those for Tyler have always been the biggest, like, struggles that I have faced in my life, because one, growing up as a closeted gay guy in Texas, like, you just hear so many people say being gay is wrong, like, it's a sin, like, you're constantly being told, like, don't be this way. And so how did I cope? Well, I overachieved. I became a perfectionist. I tried to have the highest scores, the best this, the best that, because, like, I didn't even want, I never wanted anybody to even question my sexuality, because I was like, nope, that's just, I'm going to pack that away and hide that away and, like, carry around the shame for so many years. And two, growing up as the chubby kid was not fun either, because I literally, and I was talking to my friend about this, and we both have recently gone through the gastric sleeve procedure and going through this whole journey here. We were talking about how when you're heavier and you're plus size, you actually do everything in your power to try to make yourself smaller, and not just physically smaller, but you try not to be seen. You try not to be heard. You try not to ruffle feathers, because you've already got enough eyes on you from the fact of your size, of your physical size. And so for so many years, I carried around two big things that I was deeply ashamed of: my weight and my sexuality. And carrying those things around allowed me, like, what it gave me was like I was trying to people please, because I was like, if I can make other people happy, then they won't have as much attention on me, like it was almost like this weird, and I've unpacked a lot of this in therapy, which is why I can talk about it just so easily right now. But y'all, this is not like something that you just wake up and go, that's it, that's the magic answer, like that's connecting the dots. No, I mean, it's like years of like personal development work, and then therapy, and piecing this all together, because it's complicated. This is complicated stuff. But I carried around two very shameful things, or what I thought were two very shameful things at the time. I now love both parts of that me, and that's a different conversation here. But like, it is for me, that's where it stems from, was my sexuality, being a closeted gay guy in Texas, and then my being the plus size kid, the chubby kid on the playground. Like, I already had so many eyes on me. I did everything I could to minimize myself, to keep myself small, and shrink myself down as much as I could, because I just didn't want anybody to see me. And and the way I got around that was, perfectionism allowed me to be perfect. It allowed me to achieve good scores. It allowed me to like make other people happy. And it was that perfectionism and people pleasing that allowed me to kind of like skate by. And that's heavy stuff.
And I think it's really beautiful, though, that you also acknowledge the positive intention in those things. And I think that's kind of like where I was starting with before in the very beginning, talking about how, there are positive sides to these things, right? And I think when we can acknowledge those, then it's a lot easier to let go of or reframe to something a little bit more empowering.
Yeah, I think language can play a big role in all of this, because, when you have been a perfectionist and then you kind of let this go, but like you were mentioning as an example earlier, Amanda, of like, but I like to do things a certain way. I have my own standards. And they are, now that you've worked through this, coming from a place of love, coming from a place of, yeah, I want to do it like this. I think then maybe reframing this and not calling yourself a perfectionist anymore, but having something that is more like a more constructive word for it. I think that can be a big help, because then you're letting go of these like societal norm words, and you kind of find your own way with it. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I would say too, for me, like really digging into that, like the roots of, well, where did that come from? And I'm the oldest of four. And so I feel like, just birth order already, I fell into that space of like, not, I mean, as an adult, like I know that this isn't true. And through all the work that I've done, like I know this most definitely isn't true. But as a child, like nobody cared about me, right? And though I feel like I had a very loving family, it wasn't that I didn't feel loved or I wasn't well taken care of, but it was everyone forgot about me. Again, this like these childhood beliefs, right? Because I was the oldest, and for me to my next sibling is only like a year and a half. So I was only a few months old, and then my mom was already pregnant. So it was already, thinking about the next baby, getting the room ready for the baby, and, doing all these things for the next baby. And so it, what the perfectionism did for me, this positive intention, was like I got the high scores. I did everything perfectly. I was, a good girl, quote unquote. And so I got the attention because of those things. And I wasn't lost in the shuffle of being one of four kids. And especially as the oldest, like there was a lot of responsibility that fell onto me. There was a lot of, be a good example, be a good leader, like all of these expectations, all of this pressure. And so that naturally manifested into perfectionism. And that was how I got love. And so I thought, wow, okay, well, if I'm perfect, then people will love me. And I think that's where we were, saying in before this like love, safety, belonging, all of those things. And that's truly where, for me anyways, that really came from and where that whole belief was birthed.
I'm having a moment here because we're talking about, the love, safety, and belonging and where it all stems from. I'm thinking of like of my coming out, and again, growing up in Texas, not the most LGBT friendly place in the world, but also, getting better ish, so we're making some progress down here. I think, I don't know. I like to hope, who knows, but like for me, the safety part of it, like I just had kind of like an awakening around the safety being like, I not only did I try to keep myself small for so many years, but I also tried to keep myself very bland, because I didn't want to stick out, because I was so afraid of people questioning my sexuality and being threatened, because one of the hardest things, being LGBTQ plus in this world, even still to this day, is that every day is a constant kind of threat to your safety, your physical safety. Like you don't know if you're going to walk into a restaurant and somebody, physically attack you. Like it happens. And that, I was just thinking about this, like for so many years, I didn't wear color, or I wore very like bland colors because again, I wanted to keep myself safe, and the outfit that I am wearing in Toronto for my speech, definitely not bland, definitely not basic, and I'm just having a moment, a really deep moment of love and like appreciation for how far I've come in terms of being able to show up in this world as truly my most authentic self, which is sometimes it does threaten your safety. It does threaten your belonging. It does threaten, people's, love of you. But in doing so, you find other places to belong, to feel safe, to feel loved, and like it's very scary, but like I just had that kind of like light bulb this morning going, holy moly, I literally spent most of my, you know childhood like avoiding bright colors and, anything remotely feminine, because it was like I was deeply afraid of, for my safety. And Wow. That's huge. Like pink is my favorite color, and it's crazy that like I was afraid to embrace pink, because it was like seen as, boys don't wear pink or something, the ridiculous things like that. Like, y'all, I love hot pink. Give me Barbie movie last year was like my Super Bowl. I was like, yeah, it's pink, it's bold, it's bright. Like this is totally Tyler. And that that's how far we've come, is and it's a good reflection of everything.
I'm also just having this moment of giving gratitude and compassion, like a ton of compassion to those childhood versions of ourselves that at the time, they wanted to be safe, they wanted to be loved, and they really did the best they could with what they had at the time and made the best decision for survival. And somehow we like kept the strategy forever or for like 20 years, and now we get to make different decisions. And yeah, I think getting in touch with this former version of ourselves and giving gratitude and thanks and hearing that version out, because often it wasn't heard. At least that's a big part of my story. I wasn't heard when I was like yay tall. And yeah, just having that new kind of relationship with our childhood self and or all the versions of ourselves when we were kids. And yeah, just like, I don't know, there's so much love in my heart right now that I'm sending to all of our kids versions and saying like, yeah, thank you for showing up, and thank you for making sure that we survived back then so we could sit here today and unpack our trauma. That's just the cycle of life, And I think it has taken me a while, but also taking this with a little bit of humor almost, right? Because we can do like the best parents in the world, their kids are still going to go to therapy. That's just how the world works. That's just how our brains and psyches work, and that's just the cycle of life. But still, we get to hold that all, and I think this is like such a beautiful process. And yeah, I'm just feeling so much gratitude for this right now. And also, of course, I'm pulling a muscle, not going into the gender role conversation. And
I know.
but
I
I'm
know
making a
that
mental note for next time.
that'll spark a new side of Tyler that maybe we don't want to awaken yet. It's like
No,
it's
we
like
do, but just we need to wait until
maybe
next
not
Friday.
today. We'll piggy bank that one for later. Save it for later. But I think I'm checking out this morning because I think we're coming to like a natural wrap up here of, again, just like it is that deep appreciation for the younger versions of ourselves that made it through, as Stephanie said, they made it through and they survived, and now we have the chance to thrive, and I know that's really cliche, survive to thrive kind of thing, but it is true. Like we are the co-creators of our life, of our reality. We have the power to change anything that doesn't align with us, and I feel so powerful every time I think about that. I'm like we literally are powerful beings that can change anything about us, about the world. Like we do have this power within us, and we get there not because we are perfect, but we choose every day to take imperfect action. And it's, so I'm this morning I'm expressing the gratitude for my younger self that continued to show up and take imperfect action even when it was hard, even when it was difficult, even when it felt threatening at times. Like I'm sharing a lot of like love to my younger self this morning.
So beautiful. And my final thought here today, I think, is just this reminder that, because I think we can get this one confused often, where the opposite of belonging is not rejection, it's fitting in. And we were made to stand out, and we were made to be our authentic selves and to show up in the world in our most powerful, expressed, authentic selves. And that's what I so much love about the space that we get to create here. And yes, definitely sharing all the gratitude to my younger self for getting me to where I am today, and for showing up, for showing up. Yeah.
Just
Oh my
like,
gosh, I've never heard this before. I got like so goosebumps, and I'm like tearing up for what you said, Amanda. Thank God we're recording this. I'm gonna listen to this part again. I'm like, wow, this sounds so cool. I never thought of it that way. So thank you so much for sharing this. I'm just blown away by that phrase now. So I'm gonna leave it at that. And I'm gonna say thank you to everyone coming here and listening, watching. We hope you enjoyed this. We also hope you enjoyed the new time, starting the day with us, or wherever you are. Maybe you're finishing the day with us. And thank you so much. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks so much, everybody.
bye.
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 Thank you for listening to Come As You Are, the podcast. You can follow the show on Instagram at Kaya the Podcast and on YouTube and Facebook by searching Kaya the Podcast. If you haven't already done so, please help us keep the conversations going by subscribing, rating, reviewing, and sharing this podcast. And be sure to join us next time for another deep conversation.